The views and opinions expressed by the guests of Sasquatch Experience do not necessarily reflect the opinion of the hosts, sponsors, or affiliates of the Sasquatch Experience. As always, listener discretion is advised.
911, what are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
Does a legend walk among us, lurking in the forests of our world?
Did you see what it was? Was it a person or an animal or?
I can't tell. All I know is that my central light came on and I just happened to glimpse and see this thing running across the yard. A good-sized man or something. It looks like a man. I don't know what it was.
For over 15 years, we've talked with scientists, researchers, investigators, and witnesses, trying to gain insight and proof around the existence of this mysterious entity.
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Gio!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh. Okay, hang on.
He's right...
Is he in your yard, sir?
Yeah, God, he's big.
Okay, what's he doing in your yard?
He's looking at me.
Join us as we continue into the investigation of the Sasquatch Experience. And good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Sasquatch Experience. Juneteenth, Monday, June 19th, 2023. I'm Sean the Fort Chop Forker, Vance Nesbitt, James Baker, Matt Arner, and Henry May, who joined us during the intro. Hey, Henry, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. You faring well down there okay with all the weather you guys have going on?
Yeah, it was rough for a while, but we made it.
Well, good. Always happy to see your smiling face there, you cherubed cheek.
We worried.
Face of joy. Henry May, right there, folks.
I don't know, Henry. You split into this show tonight like a great baseball player sliding into home plate, man. You just snuck it right in there. That was awesome. Good for you.
Yeah, guys, we're back. We had a week off, as per usual. This week, talking about the Swamp Apes, something a little different, going down south, taking a little break away from the northern tier and what's going on in Pennsylvania to the south. We're talking about the Boggy Creek monster, the Swamp Apes of the Everglades, the Skunk Apes. And every time I think of Skunk Apes, guys, I think of David Shealy from the old Unsolved Mysteries episode, somebody I followed for many years, who has quite the I don't know, dubious reputation, I would say. He's kind of, you can like the guy. I tell you what, he's really hard to not like because he's very interesting. But, as with people that tend to make a lot of outrageous claims, sometimes they lack a little of the evidence to back that up. So, Henry, what do you think of, Henry, when you hear swamp ape or skunk ape? What comes to mind for you?
Well, definitely, you would say the Falcon monster or the Creek monster. Also, let's not forget about the Honey Island swamp monster, also Louisiana.
Yeah, but the Honey Island swamp monster, Henry, was that more primate or more reptile?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know.
Because that toes, remember? Those toes that were pretty... Well, Matt, you and I were talking about this the other day. For some reason, you and I were sending...
Yes.
It's not unusual for Matt and I to talk back and forth several times a day. That's not what is unusual. But we were talking about a particular footprint that we found that we saw from, I think it was Florida. And as we were talking about it, that had that distinct four-toe impression. But then I pulled up alligator prints and showed them to Matt. And truth be told, you could draw a lot of similarities between the two.
Yeah, I saw those as
Absolutely.
alligator prints. Yeah.
Yeah, the one thing is too is that with the alligators, they do have basically two of their I guess appendages that are first they're webbed, and there's two appendages that are very close together, so it could look like three as opposed to 4 or 5 appendages on that foot.
Yeah, and where they come together,
Yes.
it's kind of like in that middle. It looks like that middle toe. Well, it becomes like a middle toe, and which gives you that 4-toe impression, which looked a lot like those footprints we were talking about the other day. And I'm trying to find them right now. For some reason, I didn't have them at the ready.
You know, the only thing that was missing from the cast print that would have compared it to an alligator, the only thing that I saw that was missing was the claw imprint, because they do have claws on their feet, and I didn't see any impressions of a claw imprint, which would be separate from the foot imprint itself. Whether those got casted, they probably would have been casted separately from the footprint, but I didn't see any representation of that.
Well, what I'm going to do here is go ahead, James. Well, you go ahead and talk. I'll try to get.
Wouldn't there also be a shimmy? You know, because it's, and then the body, and then the tail's moving, and da da da. I mean, the weight distribution sounds about right.
Not necessarily, though, because when an alligator or crocodile gets up to run, its body is not on the ground dragging. Nor is it
okay,
tail.
so they run. I'm
Yes,
not an
they do
alligator
run.
specialist.
Yeah, no,
that's just scary.
They are on all fours, and that's the only thing making contact with the ground. That's how they can get up some speed to take down a prey.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I wondered about the shimmy because, you know, like,
No, that makes perfect
you think
sense.
about it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I could just
No,
see it
that
now. I'm
makes
in
perfect
Florida
sense,
and
right?
somebody knocks on my door with candygram and it's an alligator doing this. I'm like, yeah, we done. Yep.
Yeah. I don't know. We're still taking up donations for WD-40 for Baker in case anybody was curious.
I gotta get a new chair. The last 2 weeks have been a little eventful. I'm gonna get one.
That's
I might
okay.
swap it out for my office chair.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll dip it in something.
I don't know. I really like this
a little
chair
bit
though.
of a
It's just the right
lubricant.
comfort. Either that, or I could actually just sit down one day with the screwdriver and just
What
figure
we
out
were-
why it broken.
What we were talking about, Matt and I, were actually David Shealy's footprint castings that he had in that case, like a shadow box. And both those prints that he has, I'll put them on the show page here after the show tonight, so folks can reference them. Sasquatch Experience on Facebook. Both of those prints could very well be gator prints. I think Matt and I kind of discussed and determined that they were. Producer Brian Corbin, Swamp Ape, he's a gas. He also has gas. So.
Hey, yeah, henceforth the whole, I get it. Totally get it.
But, you know, guys, I guess the one thing is 1950s, the skunk ape really starts taking off of popularity, really going into 70s, and then doesn't really slow down. I think skunk ape sightings have been pretty prevalent since the 50s. But
sure.
There was something else that happened in the 1950s that was pretty interesting, and I'm going to kind of cue Baker up for something he wanted to talk about and something he's talked about in the past. Guys, do you know one form of entertainment that started to die down in the 1950s?
No, go ahead, do share.
The circus.
So,
Okay.
So the circus started dying out right after World War II, and television started becoming the medium of choice. And then the 1920s, the animal rights groups, kind of started getting after, the big circus companies for the treatment of animals, mainly lions and tigers, and they started walking back their use from them. But we all know Florida tended to be a pretty, big home for some of the circus folk, right? Jupiter, Florida itself, right, was the kind of base camp for some of these circus purveyors. And sure enough, like, what do you think may have happened to some of these apes that they didn't need anymore as the circus was starting to no longer
Right.
come to town in frequency, right? So just something I like to point out, because when you talk about the skunk ape, you're talking about an ape that's 5 to 6 feet tall on average, not nearly as big as a Sasquatch in terms of overall build, right? You're talking about 100 pounds or more.
Right.
Depending on, and then you go and the Myakka skunk ape photograph that Lauren Coleman got sent to him anonymously, right? I think it was late 90s, early 2000s. He got that photograph, which to me looked like a chimp, kind of a white bearded chimp.
Right.
Added more credence to that perhaps the skunk ape that we're seeing may be an ape. Go ahead, Bake.
So my biggest thing was, as we talk about, there's a lot of sightings between Florida, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, where the swamps area are, up into Mississippi. Excuse me with the burp. But if you look at the past history, he mentions of it 1950s. 1950s, people decided to stay home. Before that, once every Saturday or once a month, a carnival come through, a sideshow event. They went to live theater. So these live theaters had to do more and more outrageous things. So they bring exotic animals in, they bring a variety of things. Well, as these shows died out, they wouldn't kill the animal unless they were hungry, but they would usually just let it go, or they had ones that escaped, in different parts of the country. Now, most of them they also had a lot of pharmaceutical companies that were doing some things, makeup companies, things like that were doing things, and they were testing on apes. They didn't actually declare how many apes they were testing on and things like that. So some of those apes were just let free, or someone helped them out of the cage, as you said, some of the groups. And so these animals, let's say Bobo is in New York, okay, and it starts to get cold, okay? So he makes his way to where it's getting warmer. Well, the Appalachian Trail to me has always been a straight shot from a cold environment down to a warm environment, and we see a lot of people that see things in different areas. We also had zoos that flooded or shut down and things like that. Well, a lot of these people didn't have the money to take care of the animal properly, and there was no government sanctions that noticed anything. So they all fled down to Florida or Georgia or Mississippi, somewhere that the climate's a little more closer to what they're used to. And they start breeding. Florida, of course, we have NASA. NASA never really tells you how many apes they used for their different programs and testing, for two main reasons. One, they don't want to kind of have a report, and two, some of the things they did we're not supposed to know. Okay, right. So you take those apes and you take the apes that are funneling down through the Appalachian Trail. They meet, they make babies. They're like, where should we go? Well, they got swampland and all these other areas where no humans are at for miles, and they just start bunnying it, So I think I've been saying this for years, I think some of these natural skunk apes we're seeing are apes.
Right.
And that, they might be, and they might not all look right, because the orangutan doesn't care what the chimp woman looks like. He's just kind of wants some. No. And I'm sorry, but
we
the,
see where you're going. Yeah.
The girl, the poor one that they use cosmetics and she can't see. She doesn't really see who's on the other end of that dating pool, and then she has 4 kids and they look like blah. Right. And then evolution takes us. Now, I've talked to Forker about this one, and if you know anything about Florida, Florida has a really big population of, I'm trying to think the word they use, unnatural animals. I'm going to use that word because I can't think of the word. I've got a small sinus block.
Invasive species.
Non-indigenous, right? Or
non-indigenous invasive species, both.
Yes.
The cobra population in Florida is amazing. Not all those came from, not all of them came from Florida. Certain people somebody bought a weird lizard or gecko or whatever it is in New York. And Mama said, you ain't having this, and she threw it outside. Well, sooner or later, it's going to find warmth or die.
Right.
And they moved down to the warmer states. Florida being one of the consistently weathered states.
I think you're
catches
talking about
a lot
pythons,
of these.
by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, pythons.
Pythons,
Yeah. There's some
right.
cobras, though.
Yep.
Yeah, but pythons are pretty much the
Python's the big
most
one.
common invasive
Right.
species. The big one.
And then they
Right.
get into the
There's
swamp
a-
regions. Go ahead, sorry.
There's a couple major invasive species in Florida that are really big right now. One is the boa constrictor, which a lot of these are pets released into the Everglades. It's a subtropical environment, which is absolutely perfect for them. There's a lot of food for them, and they're thriving. And
Rodents,
it's at the point
frogs.
where they have the bounties on them right now. But
Right.
the other one that's really kind of melded into the environment is something called the peacock bass, which is originally from South America. It was brought up and dumped in the canals in the Miami area, and they are nasty looking tropical fish, but they could fight, and they're actually really good to eat. And they haven't really destroyed the ecosystem down there like they thought it would, but I think that's because there's such a big sport fishery
Right.
for them.
Right.
And then we also have James, like you were saying with the monkeys. I always think of Tampa. They have I think they're vervet monkeys that are living. They've been living since the 1940s, right outside of the city of Tampa, and that population has just been been getting strong,
Right.
over the years. So,
Right.
So, I mean, the
they
theory
bring
is
up some
solid.
great points. Yeah.
No, the theory is very solid. When Sean brought up the whole skunk ape, I was doing research for this, skunk ape project for probably the last 6 years. Now, there's a lot of good documentation, journalists, going back to the 1700s up into the early 1800s of the rum trade. Now, you're bringing a lot of ships across the Pacific Ocean from Africa. You're bringing it up from South America into the tropics. So you're talking the Bahamas, you're talking Cuba, you're talking Florida, wherever the ships landed. They would bring all sorts of tradable things with them, including animals. And orangutan was part of that animal trade. Now, you let an orangutan go with male, female species in a tropical swamp environment, 243 or 250 years later, there's going to be an adaptation of that animal to that environment. They generally, their mode of transportation is on all fours, but if you're talking a lot of water, they learn how to walk upright, just like the billy ape that was discovered in the early 2000s. They walk through the waterlands bipedally so that their entire body isn't submerged in the water. And I'm wondering if in that 250-year period of time, if these have evolved even just a little bit to bipedally change their physique, including their feet, to transport themselves through extreme conditions in a swampland in order to get food and be able to sleep in an environment where it's not soaked, because there is a lot places in the Everglades that, you can bed down for the night. But I'm wondering if there's been, an evolutionary change, and maybe that's part of what you're saying, Bake. You're bringing in these exotic species from all over the world when we've learned how to ship from the east to the west.
And they didn't care.
Dump it.
There wasn't a custom.
Nobody cared. Nobody cared at all. I see it today here with an animal that's called the cormorant. That's an Asian bird. We've never had cormorants here when I was a kid. Never saw it. They look very much like a loon. They're a duck type of aquatic bird, but their bodies don't float on the top of the water. All you see is their neck and their head, and they fish. Now all of a sudden we're just completely dominated with cormorants here. Why? Well, because they came over on container ships. They were on the container ship. They come here. Well, now they thrive in this area because we're on the same parallel of the, with the longitude as with Asia. Okay, so the temperature isn't a whole lot different, and the foods, we'll eat a fish. It's all, and I'm
Animals
wondering.
will eat what they need to eat.
Well, they'll eat what they need to eat, but again, I'm wondering if, an orangutan, or maybe this is a Bigfoot type of creature that's undiscovered, that's considered, the skunk ape that's living in Florida. It could be either or. And I don't want to hear anybody say, well, I'm an expert and I know, and that's not, because I would just, no, that's not a thing.
You make a point, and I'll counter that. It's not a bad point. I may be wrong. I will admit that. Anybody who knows me, there's a good chance. Okay? But here's the thing. The skunk ape might also be an offshoot. Hey, Bigfoot saw Bobo and it's like, yeah, we having some of that, and then they had little Boba-ettes that were kind of Bigfoot and were kind of ape. Right. We don't know enough about both animals.
We don't.
Well, we know about one animal, but we don't know about the other animal to say he can't breed with that.
Right. No, and that's why I think your point is extremely valid, that if you had an orangutan and there's chimpanzees or other, primates, maybe there is a little bit of crossbreeding going on there. And now you got something completely different looking that you just don't recognize in the normal spectrum. Because in their environment, in their natural habitat, no, they're breeding with each other. But if you're talking one female orangutan and one male chimpanzee, well, my desires kind of see you as a little interracial here, and
you have to wonder if that's genetically possible.
Well, that's a Meldrum question, probably.
Yeah.
Well, Meldrum's a foot doctor. He's not a genetic.
He's a foot doctor.
My bad.
Meldrum's a nice guy, pretty smart, but I don't think he answers all our questions. We'll ask somebody that's got a background in genetics. Henry, I was thinking of the lizard man of Ochre Swamp, not the Honey Island swamp monster.
Oh yeah, lizard man.
Yeah, I just had to clarify that for the record because for some reason I took a stupid pill.
That's okay. I take them all the time.
And while we're on that stupid pill comment, we'll go ahead and take a quick break for our news segment. We'll hydrate, refresh, and come back with more Swamp Ape as soon as I can get the things to respond. Here we go.
Push the
News
button.
team, assemble!
Yes, it's another heartfelt, fun-filled adventure on the Bigfoot Bullhorn, exclusively on the Sasquatch Experience. Happy Monday to you all. I hope everybody's having had a good weekend and a happy Father's Day, and we'll have a great up-and-coming week. And that shifts gears from what we were just talking about with the skunk apes, swamp apes, however you want to refer to them as. So I'll share a little bit on the Bigfoot Bullhorn. Reports of the skunk ape were particularly common back in the 1950s and 1970s. The BFRO has archived hundreds of alleged sightings across almost every county of Florida going back to 1955. One of the most famous encounters was in the 1970s. Two Palm Beach County Sheriff's deputies reported that an ape-like creature stalked them through the grove, or a grove, before they shot at it. They followed the trail of footprints that led them to a pushed-down fence with snagged hair in it. Despite several witnesses, no body or evidence was ever found. Now you may be asking yourself, have there been any sightings in Florida recently? Well, this is what we're talking about. Sightings continue to this day. 48 out of the 67 counties in Florida have reported sightings since 2010. One of those most recent sightings was in 1997. Yeah, that's not recent, but a photograph of a dark, upright figure in the swamp was taken by the Ochpe Fire Control District chief. And within 2 weeks, over 50 people reported alleged sightings of a hairy creature within the Big Cypress National Preserve. Now, whether the skunk ape truly exists or not still remains a mystery. When we come back, we'll do some updates for you on up-and-coming things that you might want to participate in. So stick around.
You're listening to the Sasquatch Experience.
What knockers?
Oh, thank you, Doctor.
Got knockers? I know I don't. Welcoming our new sponsor to the Sasquatch Experience, Got Knockers. A fun and innovating group with products and conversations alike. Wear proudly the Bigfoot Got Knockers apparel at Etsy. Just search Got Knockers on Etsy. Then be sure to go over to the Facebook and join the Got Knockers community with numerous popular names you've heard of and trust. Thank you to Got Knockers for this new venture. Again, visit Etsy, Got Knockers, and the Facebook community group. Well, thanks for sticking around. The Fayette County, Pennsylvania Bigfoot Research Project has 3 more events coming up this year. The first one is this coming weekend, Saturday and Sunday, June 24th and 25th, Bullskin Flea Market, which is at the Bullskin Fairgrounds. And guess where that's located? Yes, you'd be correct. Bullskin Township, Pennsylvania. But that's next weekend, the 24th and 25th. And on July 15th, and boy, I hope I pronounce this correctly, and if I don't, feel free to slap me upside the head. On July 15th, Bigfoot Conference, Perry Township Volunteer Fire Company at Perryopolis, Pennsylvania? Did I pronounce that correctly? I'll shake your head, raise your hand, whatever. And then on August 19th, the 6th annual Bigfoot Day at Patsy Hillman Park in Hiller, Pennsylvania. Thanks again for listening to this edition of the Bigfoot Bullhorn exclusively on the Sasquatch Experience. And remember, keep your toes in the mud, and let's get back to walking around the swamp.
Well, as you can see right now, our beer of the night looks like our graphic crapped out on us there. Bush Light Peach, guys. I have been on a kick for this beer since yesterday. Since I cracked open my first can from our folks over here at Beer Here, located in River Avenue in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Our beer sponsors for the program, as we like to bring in the beer of the night. So refreshing, light and crisp. It's like drinking a peach. It's
peach.
And add I believe, what is it, 5 ABV, Baker? 5% ABV, if that?
I can't see that well today.
All I know is I could drink the 30-pack all too easy if I wanted to. So go out before it's gone. It's a limited summer release. Go to your nearest distributor and pick up a pack of Bush Light Peach. You won't regret it.
If you don't mind me adding,
go ahead.
That we were talking about David Shealy in Florida, and now you're talking about beer. And I see, if any of our Florida friends would like to be nice, there's Skunk Ape Lager at the Skunk Ape headquarters. That would be, I'm going to say, that would be a fantastic beer to try, talking about the Skunk Ape.
And a donation.
Go right up to the counter, ask the nice lady if she has some Bush Light Peach.
Anheuser-Busch. Mine's fine. Yeah. How's yours?
Yep.
Well, get yourself down to, what is it? Ochope, Florida. There. What is it, off the Interstate 75 or something like that? 15 miles south of Interstate 75 on the old Alligator Highway. Highway 41, Ochope, Florida. Get yourself some skunk ape lager. Stop in to see David Shealy, the Skunk Ape Museum, and tell them the folks at the Sasquatch Experience sent you.
Mm-hmm. Or at least recommended you to stop in.
Wow, and a new can just miraculously teleported to my desk.
Oh, look at that. Wow.
Fantastic.
I'm still working on this one.
No.
Our executive producer, who's always listening behind the scenes, I'm on it, will be in Florida on Wednesday. Report back, Brian.
Nice.
Another person who shares our love for beer and Bigfoot. Guys, it's synonymous. I don't know if there's very many people involved in the research who doesn't like a nice cold one every once in a while. We're not advocating alcoholism. We're just saying we like a nice drink.
Not advocating, no.
So let's get back to the subject at hand. You know, guys, we talked about skunk apes, swamp apes. The whole Gulf Coast has a plethora of sightings and a bunch of different monsters that all claim home to the various regions in the area. I was watching an episode of Swamp People one day, and lo and behold, even the alligator king himself, Troy Landry, got on there and was telling a story about Old One Eye, and you could hear the screams from Old One Eye late at night on the bayou down there. Very interesting stories. And then, of course, you got the Honey Island swamp monster, Harlan Ford, 1963. Eventually, he ended up getting some video that was released after his death. Henry, did you ever see the Honey Monster footage?
I have, yes. It was part of Dana Holyfield's documentary on the Honey Island Swamp Monster. It's very interesting, but I have to say it's inconclusive.
Yeah. Henry, Dana was his granddaughter, correct? Was Harlan's granddaughter.
That's correct.
She's also on an episode of Swamp People where they talk about some of these legends, but there is a documentary she did on the Honey Island Swamp Monster. That's where we start getting into, and then of course there's been some other shows, the Lost Tapes, if you guys remember that kind of paranormal documentary-esque style show they did for Travel Channel once upon a time. They did an episode about the swamp apes on the skunk apes on that. But then you also start getting into, you know, one could say the most famous skunk ape or swamp monster would be the Boggy Creek monster from the Legend of Boggy Creek.
Right.
Which I think falls right along the category into the skunk apes, though some may say it's its own creature. You know, as you start traversing the byways, the backwoods byways, also known as the swamps, creeks, and the rivers, they all empty out to the same place, right? You go right out there into the Gulf, and there are some just hair-raising stories out there, guys.
Mm-hmm. No, and the Boggy Creek monster in the whole genre that took place. You guys notice this? I know this kind of goes off subject a little bit, but the dates of these sightings taking place in the 60s and 70s just seem to be such a plethora of sightings in that time frame. And then within late, you get sightings here and there, and I know the internet has changed everything. I get that. And I put that into the equation. But it seems like that was the romanticism during that time period with these creatures, especially the Boggy Creek. And I'm wondering if it's because of that, that's what makes that one of the most popular stories to share.
I think you could take that in today's world and start incorporating things like, you know, YouTube, creepypasta. You know, that's just a new way we share these urban legends and stories. But think this, that in the 60s and 70s, drive-through movies were becoming popular. Film and TV were on the rise. And what better way to create content than to visualize some of the stories that came out of these areas?
Right.
You know, so it's kind of one of those, what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? Well, in this instance, you know, what really did come first? Did the media manifest the monster, or did the monster just incorporate and elevate the media to start, pushing these B movies together?
Right. Well, that's kind of what my point is, with how media is today, because you can pick up media from so many different sources that you can share a pretty fantastic story, whether it's, a homemade or a small town monsters type of presentation about a certain creature. It doesn't have the same impact socially as the drive-in theater did back in the 70s when Boggy Creek was a thing. Because then everybody was enthralled by one story, where now we're being kind of flooded with so many stories, and then you got to sort out the BS from the maybe not BS. And it kind of takes away that romanticism of the Boggy Creek monster. But yes, like you said at the beginning of that comment, that is a very prominent swamp ape or skunk ape creature that could have very well have moved up through the chain of rivers and swamps to move north. Who's to say why? Maybe could to get into a cooler region, even though it's not that much cooler. But the point is a change of food source or whatever. But I guess my point is the entire society at that period seems so more engulfed and enwrapped enveloped in that story than we are getting stories today. Yeah, you might find them fascinating, but now you got to sort out who the hoaxers are.
Well, you go to 1818 in Apalachicola, in Florida, a man-sized monkey raiding food stores and stalking fishermen along the stores, right? And then you have Seminole Indians that have stories of foul-smelling monsters. So that stuff predates the movies, and of course that's just from a quick Wikipedia scan there. I'm trying to find that actual newspaper clipping because, or maybe I could just pull up my copy of the historical Bigfoot here from Chad Armand. I could beat someone to death with this book if I don't destroy my desk in the moment. This is quite the tome here, as you can see. But go ahead, James. You were going to say something before I digress.
So one thing you guys all brought up from like the 1800s to the 1970s, we'll say whatever we want, but like people gathered. There were cookouts, there were fires, there were a variety of things. There were special there were special events at the prison. We're not going to call them specifically what they were, but there were a lot of people would get together for church. People would get together for town halls. So, like, if I had a sighting and I felt comfortable about telling it, you heard it from me. I told you 5 people what I felt and what happened. So I would honestly love that compared to a
right on the social
because I can see in your face, and I also know you. Hey, that's the banker from down the road, not Bobby the Rummy. So a lot of times these stories, they moved on, and sometimes, like you were talking about the 1880s and things like that, is if food went missing and someone saw something and they're like, hey, that wasn't us, and I don't think it was an Indian, I have no clue what it is, it's not a bear, they would form groups to find out what this thing is, or blame the Indians, but that's a whole other problem. But like everybody would hear the story from the mouth that saw it and be able to judge individually that, hey, Bob can't, I'm just going to ignore it, go back to my house,
well, here's
whatever.
One.
So, go ahead.
Here's one, James, from the Apalachicola Gazette. May 7th, 1840, states that the habitation of some unknown animal has just been discovered in the upper part of that city, which has given rise to many strange conjectures. The animal at the time of discovery was in it, but made its escape. It is said by those who saw it to resemble somewhat the baboon, and from the size of the nest it is judged to be 5 feet in height and of carnivorous description, as many bones were found about the premises. The nest was nicely made of loose cotton between several bales. So, it's really interesting to think about. What's the term they use in here? Nest. What have our friends up in the Olympic Project been kind of staking on? Nest.
Yes.
So now we have proof back in the 1800s before modern day Bigfooters are talking about Bigfoot nests, that there's some precedent for that. Just even in the history books, literally, the historical Bigfoot, in the history books, written in newspapers from a time where they would have no reference for that.
Mm-hmm.
That's in Florida.
I think I was going to say the other thing too is comparing the Olympic project to something in Florida. The Olympic project, you have logging roads that can take you to well within the range, and then it may be a strenuous hike, but you can get there. Some of these swamps, in whether it's in Florida, Mississippi, Louisiana, they're almost totally inaccessible. That whether you have a boat or if you're going in any other way, you can't put feet on the ground on every part of that swamp. And there's areas of those swamps that no person has set foot on. Mm-hmm. So it would be easy for something to stay hidden, to have a nest in an environment like that.
Right. Yeah, and to your point, Matt, you could be 100 yards away, 50 yards away from where something is habitating. You would never know it. You would never see it. Just because of accessibility to get there, right?
Well, and besides that, there's also alligators, water moccasins, and everything else that are between you and that 50 yards that, you know what, I don't think I'd be putting my feet down there. No.
But we take for granted that stuff today, but you going back to the 1800s, these creatures still exist. You still had water moccasins, and you still had really dangerous animals where we didn't have the protection of what we had today. And keep in mind, guys, when there were slaves escaping in the Underground Railroad, they went through that shit a lot of times barefoot without the comforts of what we have today. And you want to talk about perilous journeys and what these people went through, to get freedom. They went through these treacherous places, and we're talking about real creatures that exist, but not even the skunk ape. But here's a story. Let me share another one from Alabama. It's called A Terrible Encounter, a half-human monster in a cave, and this is from the Weekly Advertiser, October 11th, 1888. Rocky Creek, Alabama, October 6th. The long-supposed but heretofore undiscovered cave, which was, before the war, the rendezvous of deserters and escaped slaves, has at last been discovered by a gentleman from Greenville, Mr. S.B. Brown. While traveling the road from Monterey to Rocky Creek and passing through the old lime hills, which are familiar to old settlers, he discovered, while looking for a spring to get water, the entrance to a cave. The gentleman, whose curiosity was excited, determined to explore the cave, and dismounting, he entered. And upon advancing 40 or 50 feet into the cave, it enlarged into a cavern 50 by 80 feet wide, the floor of which was covered with skeletons of supposed human beings. While gazing in amazement upon the spectacle, his attention was attracted by a snarling, rasping noise which seemed to come from another quarter of this cavern, and upon looking, he saw approaching a hideous monster, half human and half savage, about 4.5 feet high, with arms 3 feet long, whose head was level with its shoulders. And the entire upper portion of its body was covered with kinky hair of a motley color, the lower portion of its body being entirely bare, the skin having a rough, callous appearance, its feet being formed with claws like an eagle. Its face was full and resembled a gorilla. It approached Mr. Brown in a stealthy manner, and within 10 feet of him it sprung, with a blood-curdling howl, upon Brown's shoulders. Fortunately, Mr. Reynolds and Dr. Jarrett were passing, and upon hearing the noise, rushed to the rescue of Brown and succeeded in overpowering the demon. Brown is seriously lacerated about the neck and breast, his clothing being completely torn off. The monster was left in the cave, and Brown carried to Cheatham's house nearby and cared for by his good lady and the doctors. A posse of young men formed themselves into a body and captured the animal and killed it, and it can now be seen at Sermon's Gin House. Several men have been missing around here for the last 10 years, and this accounts for it. But for Mr. Brown using his knife with effect, he probably would have been killed before assistance arrived. I will keep you posted on the matter if anything more should happen. Mr. Brown is getting along all right at the present. Several Negroes left this section to work on railroads around Birmingham and have never been heard of since. And the description of Jean's coats tallies with one described by the mother of a missing boy. So you think about this creature was killing and eating people, and this gentleman happened to stumble upon it. He's getting attacked. He screams, and a doctor and another gentleman come in, and now they, supposedly killed this creature, put it up for show in the gin house, which, could also be the explanation for several other disappeared men in the area. So think about that. This is like the 1880s, if that, and it's just, there's a lot of detail that goes in there, but really kind of, you think about the description: 4.5 feet tall, neck or head level with the neck. Guys, what's that sound like to you?
Yeah, well, it sounds like what you brought up earlier with the baboon or a gibbon. And it could have just been, adapted to a carnivorous, that's the wrong word, but a cavernous environment where maybe some of the hair isn't necessary or is worn off. It's elderly, it's vicious, it's protecting its area.
We know,
or
we
it
know
could just be
primates
this.
are carnivorous.
Right.
That's not new.
It could just
Or
be
it's
an
a human
undiscovered
hybrid.
or something.
Think about chimpanzees. Chimpanzees will eat one another.
Oh yeah,
they will attack one another. They will hunt each other down. Yeah. Now think about that. If you're in a place where there aren't any other chimpanzees, but you still have the sense of territory and the same desires to eat and attack, it's not out of the realm of question. And look, they didn't have the weaponry we have today to mow these things down. Definitely a lot more vulnerable to the attack of these things than we are. Not that the people who are, getting attacked by chimpanzees regularly, they usually call in the police who ice this animal, but in this instance, kind of the same thing, like woefully underprepared to be attacked by an ape of this caliber.
Yeah, well, even at 4 feet tall, I would still be terrified.
4.5 feet tall.
Yeah,
with, a good size for a chimp, and chimps are what, twice the strength of humans?
Oh, easily.
And if it caught you right, you'd be down before you noticed it.
Sure.
I mean, just things to think about when we talk about the skunk ape and the swamp apes, and you now have stories from Florida, you have stories in Alabama. I'm sure if we went and pursued more, let's even look at the Boggy Creek creature. The shaggy hair covered, all descriptions of it. It's not it's a lot different in look than the Pacific Northwest Bigfoot. Right. Which could, without allowing for some scaling up the sense of human estimation and storytelling, could the Boggy Creek monster also have been maybe a little bit smaller in stature?
Possibly.
Right.
Well, generally, descriptions of the Boggy Creek monster are they're at least 7 foot tall. So not as tall as perhaps your North American your Pacific Northwest Sasquatch.
Right.
Yeah, what I'm saying is, Henry, though, that's not allowing for over embellishment either.
Yeah,
I got my butt kicked by a 5 foot tall thing. I'm adding 2 feet.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you got your ass kicked by a 5 foot tall creature.
Yeah, easily. And I want to throw something out towards Matt too. Geographically difference between the southern states, meaning Louisiana, Florida, the Mississippi area, and as you move north, you get into areas through Kentucky that do have caverns and caves, whereas the southern states not so much. It's lower to sea level. I'm wondering if that has any kind of geographical difference to the size of an animal that may live there, because we have so many reports and theories out there that the apes or Bigfoot that's in the Pacific Northwest or through upper northern central United States may dwell in caves, whereas down south that's not available. Maybe that's a difference in stature in their size. Well, get your take on that.
Yeah, the one thing is that we're also talking about different geological strata, whereas in the Pacific Northwest, even in the Appalachians, we have a different geological structure. Down in the Florida area, in the Gulf Coast region, we do have a lot of limestone, which will provide caves or caverns. However, especially as you move farther south, again, you're under, like you had brought up, they're under sea level. So now you have these big pits, or you have these underground caverns. And that's always a possibility that if they don't have that much space and they, something's going to be smaller.
Yeah, right. You grow to the size of your environment. Yes. Yeah, that makes sense. Right. Yep. That makes sense. No, I was just curious to get your feedback on that because, you look at cave systems on a cave systems map of the United States. There ain't nothing down south that way. Yeah, but as you progress further north, even up into Canada and to the western United States, yes, there's massive cave systems, and in places you would not expect. And that's the thing too. It's just like, wow, there's a cave system underneath my feet. I had no idea that was here. None.
We found that. We found that interesting when we were doing episodes on the missing, when we pulled up the cave system map in perspective, in comparison to missing people. That was pretty, interesting information to have.
Well, it's compelling, right?
The Bigfoot mapping project, for anybody who cares to, pay attention to all things Bigfoot. Bigfootmap.com. You can go in there and explore. My God, man, does that really have the sightings? Matt, this is what we were trying to do with the Keystone Bigfoot project back in the early days. Somebody, who knew what the hell they were doing did a much better job in compiling the data. And actually, I should get a hold of them and see if they have some stuff from Pennsylvania that they might not have had, that they may not have from my collection. Anyhow, all stuff that they need to go and just go and take a look at it. Bigfootmap.com. I mean, I'm just kind of lost my train of thought there because I'm just zooming in, and my God, guys, the information you're going to find, incredible.
And the one thing is that we get, and this is something I brought up before too, is a lot of times reports aren't made to the BFRO or they're not made to their local groups. It might be somebody just saying something on Facebook. And some of these Facebook groups that are associated in the Gulf region, particularly Florida, you may get, some of these experiences coming out that may get lost, eventually, before it reaches the Bigfoot mapping project, because it's somebody saying, "Hey, I was out in the Everglades. We were hunting boas, and we had something." Come up behind us, red eyes, give them the whole description. But if they're not making that actual statement to somebody that could forward it to the Bigfoot mapping project, it gets lost. And how many sightings are there out there like that we may not be aware of?
Or the wild hog people.
Right. Absolutely.
Right.
One thing I think we forget is, for us, it's 4 hours out into the woods to find a spot that they are dwelling. To them, it's like you just open your front door and there's a neighbor standing on your porch. So, like, a lot of times we have these sightings or we have these areas where they're like, oh, it took me 2 days to get into the bush and da-da-da, and I found this random albino alligator. That's fine. There might be 100 of them. Problem is it took you 2 days to get to him. And the other 100 may still be around, but they're not going to come out if they start noticing a bunch of people just showing up in their yard. Well, or they'll start spreading out.
Another thing we have to start, really looking into is home security has gotten more affordable and simpler for everybody, and exterior cameras are now, smart cameras are all over the place. I think... I don't know if you can go into a neighborhood anymore and not one person have a camera somewhere placed that you could see. Matt, you know this with
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Being in law enforcement, and sometimes has made things a lot easier to get information that you need. I think it's only a matter of time before we start getting some really interesting, compelling stuff from those footage. In fact, I've been told by a few people they've seen some pretty interesting things. Just, reality is not everybody wants to put that stuff out there on the internet.
Right.
Not everybody
Right.
wants to put that stuff out there, and
No.
I haven't seen anything that has really been, compelling. But that doesn't mean somebody out there doesn't have something, or someone doesn't have something they're holding on to,
Or they missed it.
or they've missed it. Yeah, I have to tell you, not that people should come rob me or anything, but 9 times out of 10, I know what the alerts and videos are around my property at what time. If I get a 2:23 in the morning, my camera goes off. I know because of other nights at 2:23 in the morning, it's probably a cat that's, walking around setting my camera on. I'm sure a lot of people get into that mindset and they just start swiping through without really paying attention. They look at the thumbnail, nothing looks out of the way, and they just get rid of the photo or get rid of the video. Right. I got to challenge myself on that a little more, and especially those folks that live in more rural areas than we do, maybe start challenging that a lot more. Let's start paying attention to those things.
No, very true.
If you happen to see it, you can always report it to us. Report your sighting or encounter at info@sasquatchexperience.com. Might want to do a little shameless plug there, as well as our social media.
Okay. For $2 a month. What, guys? What? No.
You can join our Patreon.
That's it.
We got some great stuff going. I'm working on the Forker files right now. We're going through my case studies, and I'm going to break them down and put information out there to folks that, just haven't been able to get that information before, because I've never put it out there. And since I was the investigator, without me, you don't have it. So,
right.
For those folks that are interested in that, that'll be out there. For almost 50 minutes, we've talked about skunk apes, and we haven't even gotten into the meat of potatoes. So I think this is definitely worth another revisit here soon. We'll have the Swamp Apes Part 2. We'll start getting into some more modern reports. I think everybody knows the historical reports. Your homework, guys, for the next show is to go through some databases and pull some of the reports that give you the heebie-jeebies. Really give you the make the hair on your neck stand up. We'll talk about those in the next program or the next show we do this. And then also some of the recent reports. And by the way, I've just sat here for the last week and watched just about every documentary you can on swamp apes, skunk apes, small town monsters, Beyond the Trail, the Outcast Paranormal Team, Stacy Brown and Ryan RPG. They've got their documentaries out there. There's a lot going on. Les Stroud has got an episode. Check them out. Go to YouTube, Google your skunk ape and just start following the clicks, guys. Get lost and get yourselves immersed in, it's popular, but I don't think enough people talk about it to bring the data and the really good sightings to the forefront. Because everything I've seen has been okay, but there's just nothing that has, I don't know, really cranked me up that says, man, we got to get in a van and go to Florida. Mainly because there's big ass snakes and gators there, and I don't want to die.
Plenty of people got in a van and wound up in Florida.
Well, fair enough. Fair enough. Any final thoughts, gentlemen, tonight?
Yeah, my final thought is I think anything is possible that's going on with the skunk ape. I really do. It could be, it doesn't have to be one thing. That's my thought. It doesn't have to be one creature that's identified as a skunk ape. It could be what we talked about, chimpanzee, orangutan, and this undiscovered creature. It could be, a variety of different things that are seen. I just don't want to limit it to, it's one thing and that's it.
Fair enough. Bake?
Just when you're out there, enjoy the moment and keep going out there. Sooner or later, you'll see something that sparks your interest and go from there.
Matt, go ahead.
I'm going to reiterate back what I said before. If you had an experience, or especially in the Florida and the Gulf Coast area, please send us an email. Send a private message to Sean or any of us, and we'll do our best to keep it confidential. And we'd love to hear from you.
Henry,
just don't give up. That's all I have to say. Just don't give up. I mean, if you're on the trail of something, if you've got a lead on something, pursue it.
Henry's telling you to keep your ass in gear and go after these beasties once you see them in a safe manner. I think that's great.
Safely, right.
I think all you gentlemen bring up good points tonight. Again, Vance, I like what you said. Why does it have to be one thing? It doesn't. And to touch on what Matt said, I know sometimes we take a kind of a hard-nosed, more skeptical approach to things, but that's just to err on the side of caution. You report to us, we take every witness statement and every story seriously, and you have our utmost respect and thoughtfulness when we are investigating your claims. Absolutely. I don't want you to think that, because we take a hard line, we take that hard line with our witnesses. It's an actual, it's a privilege for us to be able to investigate them. So don't be bashful about sharing them with us. If we can't get to it, we'll get you in touch with somebody we trust in that area to investigate it, for us and report back.
And we offer anonymity. If you do choose.
Absolutely. We do keep you confidential the best we can. We don't really dive into specifics unless we have to. So anonymity is always a thing. Guys, it's been a good show. That hour goes by so quick. I think we need to budget more time on some of these topics, but I guess we've announced we'll hit this topic one more time with the Swamp Apes 2, even more stinky, coming up the next show, and then we'll start moving on to some other things. We got a lot in the pipe. We really do. So, folks, thanks for listening. Keep on squatching, and Henry, go ahead and take us out with those parting words.
Y'all be good or be good at it.
There it is. See you in 2 weeks.
You've been listening to Sasquatch Experience. Please rate and review wherever this podcast is consumed. To share your experience, visit us on Facebook or email us, squatchexperience@gmail.com. Keep on squatching.